People are taught that the Haitian Revolution began as a spontaneous slave uprising driven by chaos. Plantation owners walk the fields calmly, ledgers tucked under arms, assuming labor remains controllable. Enslaved men cut cane under supervision, posture measured, eyes tracking overseers rather than tools. Colonial officials dine indoors, discussing productivity, while armed guards stand motionless at doors. The belief holds that violence erupts only when discipline collapses and authority weakens. French officers issue routine orders, boots clean, posture relaxed, expecting compliance to persist indefinitely. This assumption survives because fear has never been tested against organized human leverage. A plantation clerk pauses mid-entry as a messenger arrives without bowing or removing his hat. The messenger delivers news quietly, eyes steady, reporting coordinated refusals across multiple estates. An overseer tightens his grip on a whip, but does not strike, waiting for instruction. Owners exchange glances, recognizing something measured rather than emotional unfolding beyond their control. Orders shift from productivity to containment. Guards repositioned closer to quarters and crossroads. Enslaved drivers stand still, tools lowered, absorbing reactions instead of reacting themselves. The first contradiction appears not in violence, but in delayed authority response. Colonial administrators summon militia captains rather than plantation managers, signaling institutional concern. Militia leaders arrive armed, posture rigid, scanning courtyards where silence replaces submission. Enslaved men and women continue assigned movements, adjusting pace without visible defiance. Officials consult documents hurriedly, searching precedents that justify force without provoking wider resistance. A priest is questioned privately, asked about meetings disguised as prayer gatherings. Church leaders answer cautiously, aware their words will shape enforcement decisions by nightfall. Authority responds to observation rather than action, revealing uncertainty beneath formality. Plantation owners begin recording absences instead of punishing them, tracking patterns across districts. Messengers ride between estates, noting synchronized pauses, tool placements, and shared glances. Colonial courts draft temporary regulations, expanding patrol rights without announcing new laws publicly. Armed patrols increase presence near mills, roads, and storage depots rather than living quarters. Enslaved workers observe patrol routes, timing, and hesitation, adjusting movements with deliberate restraint. This is not rebellion yet. It is recognition forming through measured human coordination. The system reacts before it understands what it is reacting to. French officials issue proclamations reaffirming authority, while quietly negotiating enforcement thresholds. Plantation owners request exemptions from militia searches, fearing retaliation more than loss of control. Militia captains test compliance through selective inspections, watching reactions instead of outcomes. Enslaved organizers remain unnamed, inferred through consistency rather than visible leadership. A scribe records increased meetings without agendas, listing attendees without stated purposes. Authority documents presence while ignoring agency, mistaking silence for absence. This documentation will later be cited as proof that nothing organized existed. A merchant refuses credit to an estate, lacking full labor attendance, triggering economic pressure. Owners confront administrators, demanding protection framed as preservation of the colonial order. Administrators respond with conditional assurances, linking force authorization to political stability in France. News arrives of upheaval overseas, whispered among officials, never announced to laborers. Enslaved messengers exchange information faster than official channels anticipate. The imbalance in information flow begins shifting leverage without confrontation. Power starts responding to anticipation rather than command. Militia drills become frequent, formations tightened, commands shortened to reduce hesitation. Enslaved men watch from fields, noting leadership dynamics within armed ranks. Some guards avert their eyes, others overcompensate through posture, signaling internal divisions. Plantation discipline grows inconsistent, punishment is delayed, and authority is second-guessing itself. Colonial administrators draft reports emphasizing loyalty while requesting additional troops discreetly. This dual messaging exposes fear beneath institutional language. The system begins documenting its own instability without acknowledging it. A black driver refuses a reassignment order, citing tool shortages rather than obedience. The overseer hesitates, consulting higher authority instead of enforcing discipline immediately. That hesitation spreads, observed and repeated across neighboring estates. Enslaved women redistribute labor, quietly, compensating for refusals without escalating confrontation. This redistribution maintains output while undermining direct control. Authority notices continuity without compliance, an outcome it cannot easily punish. Control weakens, not through chaos, but through adaptation. Colonial courts issue warrants against unnamed instigators, targeting symbols rather than individuals. Militia searches produce no leaders, only cooperative laborers, and intact production records. Officials grow frustrated, misreading coordination as coincidence rather than strategy. Enslaved organizers adjust communication methods, reducing meetings and increasing visual signaling. Gestures replace words. Timing replaces instruction. The system tightens surveillance, yet falls further behind coordination dynamics. Power reacts faster, but less accurately. French commissioners arrive with formal authority, uniforms, immaculate, confidence rehearsed. They tour plantations escorted by militia, asking scripted questions, answered carefully. Enslaved workers demonstrate compliance publicly, posture controlled, expressions unreadable. Privately, movement patterns shift further from overseer expectations. Commissioners conclude order remains intact, attributing disruptions to local mismanagement. Their reports will later justify delayed reforms and harsher enforcement. This misinterpretation becomes institutionalized. Plantation owners push for harsher codes, arguing discipline failures invite wider unrest. Administrators debate optics, concerned that excessive force could provoke metropolitan scrutiny. Meanwhile, enslaved networks expand beyond plantations into ports and towns. Dock workers relay information, controlling supply movement subtly. Merchants notice delays without clear causes, suspecting incompetence rather than resistance. Economic pressure accumulates without a visible antagonist. Leverage spreads horizontally, not vertically. A militia unit fires warning shots during a nighttime patrol, encountering only silence. The absence of response unsettles commanders more than confrontation would. Patrols increase frequency, stretching manpower thin across multiple districts. Enslaved organizers exploit predictability, shifting coordination windows accordingly. Authority grows reactive, responding to shadows and reports rather than confirmed actions. This reaction creates gaps, further weakening centralized control. Power begins consuming itself through overextension. Colonial administrators draft emergency measures, expanding surveillance authority under temporary provisions. These measures are enforced unevenly, exposing jurisdictional confusion. Enslaved communities adapt, relocating coordination nodes beyond administrative boundaries. Priests are monitored, meetings curtailed, yet gatherings continue under alternative pretenses. Officials track attendance numbers, not content or intent. This misalignment ensures enforcement targets symptoms rather than structure. Resistance remains ahead of institutional understanding. The plantation accountant falsifies output records to avoid scrutiny, undermining data reliability. Administrators rely on these records to assess stability, unaware of manipulation. Enslaved workers observe discrepancies, adjusting leverage where accountability weakens. The system's internal trust fractures, reducing enforcement efficiency further. Power now negotiates with itself before confronting resistance. This internal negotiation delays decisive action. Delay becomes the most consequential cause. Yet, French revolutionary rhetoric reaches the colony, filtered through officials and merchants. Administrators debate the applicability, fearing that empowerment narratives will spread uncontrollably. Enslaved organizers interpret fragments independently, integrating ideas with lived leverage. This integration remains invisible to colonial records. Authority responds with proclamations limiting discussion rather than addressing conditions. Suppression replaces engagement. That choice accelerates convergence toward confrontation. Plantation guards desert posts quietly, joining town militias for protection. Owners notice reduced loyalty, offering incentives instead of discipline. These incentives fail to restore authority, credibility. Enslaved networks note fractures within enforcement ranks. Coordination intensifies without visible escalation. The system stands intact, structurally, hollow, operationally. Collapse approaches without spectacle. Colonial assemblies convene emergency sessions, debating recognition versus repression. Minutes record caution, restraint, and commitment to order. Unrecorded conversations reveal fear of precedent spreading beyond the colony. Enslaved organizers remain unnamed, yet increasingly decisive. Authority prepares for violence, while misunderstanding its timing and form. Power anticipates eruption rather than recognizing progression. This misreading will define subsequent responses. As patrols tighten, resistance disperses, becoming harder to isolate or confront. Every institutional move produces adaptation rather than submission. The belief in spontaneous revolt persists protests, blinding officials to strategic escalation. This belief justifies delayed recognition and fragmented response. Children observe changes, learning boundaries without instruction. Public memory will later describe chaos, not coordination. The groundwork for erasure is laid before conflict begins. Officials issue final warnings, posture rigid, language absolute. Enslaved communities adjust silently, prepared for consequences already anticipated. No single act marks the turning point. Instead, accumulated decisions converge toward irreversible confrontation. Authority believes it still controls outcomes. It does not yet recognize that leverage has shifted. The moment approaches, undocumented, unannounced, and unresolved. The silence after the last meeting does not mean peace. It means decisions have been moved out of sight. French officials stand apart, speaking softly, eyes fixed on black commanders nearby. Uniforms are immaculate, but hands stay close to swords and pistols. Recognition has been granted, but only on paper, not in posture or behavior. White officers still expect obedience inside the room. Black generals notice the hesitation and adjust their stance accordingly. They stop asking and begin waiting. That shift unsettles everyone watching. French clerks record agreements that omit names spoken minutes earlier. Ink moves carefully where voices had been firm. A messenger is sent to Paris carrying documents that sound cooperative. His instructions are not behind closed doors. Ministers argue about precedent rather than justice. They fear imitation more than rebellion. If one colony holds power, others will follow. Orders return across the Atlantic with revised language and conditional recognition. The paper now carries leverage disguised as legality. French administrators arrive with smiles and new regulations. They speak of stability while adjusting tariffs and trade routes. Black leaders review the changes without raising their voices. They noticed how authority is being slowly reports reopened under French supervision. Customs officers answer to Paris again. Local merchants feel pressure before soldiers appear. The economy becomes the battlefield. Formerly enslaved farmers at told exports require approval. Credit is extended selectively. Debt replaces chains. A French naval presence increases near key harbors. The ships do not threaten openly. They wait. European newspapers frame events as chaos barely contained. They remove black leadership from headlines. The revolution becomes a disorder, not a strategy. Inside Haiti, administrators debate whether compromise buys time or erosion. There is no consensus. Some argue isolation will invite invasion. Others argue engagement invites control. France watches these divisions closely. An indemnity is proposed under diplomatic language. It is described as compensation, not punishment. The number is deliberately impossible. Payment is tied to recognition, trade, and military restraint. Refusal carries consequences left unstated. Black officials recognize the trap immediately. They also recognize that the alternatives are worse. Acceptance does not look like surrender. It looks like survival under pressure. Money begins leaving the country faster than it can be produced. Infrastructure projects stall. Schools are delayed. French banks gain influence without deploying troops. Contracts enforce compliance more efficiently than force. International observers call this stabilization. The revolution fades into an economic case study. In European universities, the uprising is simplified into inevitability. Structural violence disappears from the narrative. Individual decisions are erased. Black leadership is reframed as reactive, not strategic. Credit shifts toward abstract forces. Institutions prefer explanations without faces. Maps replace people in textbooks. Meanwhile, Haiti is isolated diplomatically. Trade partners hesitate under French pressure. Access to credit requires concessions. Each concession narrows autonomy. The people who fought for control now manage scarcity. Their authority is questioned from all sides. Internal enforcement grows stricter to maintain order. Outsiders interpret this as failure. They ignore the constraints. French archives record compliance, not coercion. The threat never needed documentation. Time does the work. Generations grow up paying for a revolution they are told already failed. Debt becomes inherited memory. Public education abroad mentions Haiti briefly. 10 Mobizon. Its success is inconvenient. Its endurance is ignored. Modern media traces poverty without tracing the cause. The line back to policy is cut deliberately. Institutional choices vanish behind statistics. The revolution is frozen in the moment of violence, not governance. This framing is intentional. It prevents comparison. If Haiti succeeded, questions follow elsewhere. Silence protects systems. Today, officials discuss aid without discussing extraction. They speak of reform without without responsibility. The same institutions still hold leverage. The same debts echo through renamed agreements. This is not the aftermath. This is a continuation. The Haitian Revolution did not end with independence. It was absorbed, redefined, and controlled, not through armies, through paperwork, credit, and narrative discipline. History did not forget Haiti. History corrected Haiti into something safer. What you were taught was not incomplete by accident. It was shaped by those who benefited. This story does not conclude with triumph or collapse. It remains active. Every omission is a decision still being enforced.